Ufology, the mystery of unidentified objects in our skies. There is something deeply human about looking up. On clear nights, we tilt our heads toward the dark expanse above us and feel, in some quiet corner of our minds, a familiar sense of wonder. The sky has always been a place of mystery, a canvas onto which civilizations have mapped their gods, their fears, and their greatest questions. And occasionally, across the centuries and right up to the present day, people have looked up and seen something they simply could not explain. A light moving in a way that no known aircraft moves. A shape hanging silently where no shape should be. A trail of brightness cutting across the atmosphere and then, just as suddenly, vanishing. These moments, fleeting, disorienting, impossible to file neatly away, belong to a strange category of human experience. Things genuinely seen, but not yet understood. Today, we are going to explore the history, the science, the culture, and the enduring mystery of ufology. The word itself is worth pausing on. Ufology comes from the acronym UFO, unidentified flying object, combined with the Greek suffix logos, meaning reason, study, or discourse. Ufology, then, is simply the study of unidentified flying objects. And here, right at the beginning, it is worth establishing something important. The term UFO does not mean alien spacecraft. It never has, technically speaking. A UFO is, by definition, something that has not yet been identified. It is a placeholder for uncertainty, not a confirmation of anything extraordinary. Most UFOs, when investigated carefully, turn out to have very ordinary explanations, but some do not. And it is that small, stubborn remainder that has driven ufology forward for decades. Before we reach the modern era of flying saucers and government investigations, it is worth knowing that strange things in the sky were being reported long before anyone had coined a term for them. The mystery, it turns out, is older than we might expect. In the 1890s, newspapers across the United States began publishing accounts of something unusual moving through the night skies. Witnesses described large, cigar-shaped objects fitted with bright lights, drifting across cities and rural landscapes alike. They were called mystery airships. What makes these reports so striking is their timing. This was before powered flight had been achieved. The Wright brothers would not make their historic journey until 1903. And yet, multiple credible observers were reporting structured aerial vehicles behaving with apparent purpose. No satisfactory explanation has ever been firmly established for the mystery airship wave. A few decades later, in the 1930s, pilots across Europe and North America began reporting something similar. They called them ghost flyers, aircraft that appeared in restricted airspace, mimicked the movements of conventional planes, and then disappeared without trace. These were not panicked civilians, but trained aviators, people professionally accustomed to identifying aircraft. Their reports were taken seriously at the time, and they remain unexplained. Then came the Second World War, and with it, one of the most evocative names in the history of unexplained phenomena. Allied pilots, American, British, and others, flying combat missions over Europe and the Pacific began noticing something following their aircraft. Glowing spheres, sometimes orange, sometimes white, that paced their planes without attacking, without communicating, and without apparent concern for the chaos of aerial warfare going on around them. The pilots nicknamed these objects Foo Fighters. The name was borrowed from a popular comic strip of the era, and it stuck. Military officials at the time initially suspected these might be secret enemy technology. But German and Japanese pilots were reporting the same phenomenon on their side of the conflict. Whatever the Foo Fighters were, they appeared to have been equally mysterious to everyone. And then, in 1946, a wave of sightings swept across Scandinavia. Sweden in particular became the focus of reports describing objects streaking through the sky at high speed, often leaving trails behind them. These were called ghost rockets. Thousands of sightings were logged in a matter of months. Swedish authorities investigated carefully, and while some were attributed to meteors, a significant number did not fit that explanation. They moved too deliberately. Some turned. Some appeared to descend into lakes. The ghost rockets were never fully explained, and they remain one of the more puzzling episodes in the pre-modern history of unexplained aerial phenomena. All of this brings us to the summer of 1947, which is, in many ways, the moment that changed everything. On the 24th of June, 1947, a pilot named Kenneth Arnold was flying his small plane near Mount Rainier in Washington state, conducting a private search for a downed military aircraft. The sky was clear. Visibility was excellent. And then, to his considerable surprise, Arnold observed 9 bright objects moving in a loose chain at extraordinary speed. He estimated their velocity at well over 1,000 miles per hour, far beyond the capability of any known aircraft of the time. He watched them for several minutes before they disappeared into the distance. When Arnold landed and reported what he had seen, journalists asked him to describe how the objects moved. He said they traveled in a way that reminded him of a saucer skipping across the surface of water. A reporter condensed this into a phrase that would echo through decades of popular culture: flying saucers. The description was immediately and enthusiastically adopted by the press. Within days, it had spread across the world. The United States Air Force, recognizing that the term flying saucer carried associations they were not entirely comfortable with, introduced an alternative: UFO, unidentified flying object. The phrase was deliberately neutral, more procedural than sensational, and yet both terms entered the cultural bloodstream together, and in doing so, they effectively created the modern era of ufology. Less than 2 weeks after Kenneth Arnold's sighting, something happened in the New Mexico desert that would define UFO mythology for generations to come. In early July of 1947, a rancher named Mac Brazel discovered unusual debris scattered across a large area of his property near the town of Roswell. He reported it to local authorities, and material was taken to the nearby Roswell Army Airfield. What happened next unfolded with remarkable speed. On the 8th of July, the Army Airfield issued a press release announcing that personnel had recovered a flying disc. The statement was brief, but its effect was immediate and electric. Newspapers around the world ran the story. Then, within a day, the statement was retracted. A senior officer held a press conference and displayed what appeared to be the remains of a weather balloon. This, he said, was what had been recovered: a weather balloon, nothing more. For many people, the reversal happened too quickly and too conveniently. Witnesses began to emerge over the following years, some claiming the debris was unlike any conventional material, others alleging that bodies had been recovered alongside it. The story grew and deepened with each passing decade, accumulating detail and speculation in roughly equal measure. The official explanation, when it finally came decades later, attributed the debris to a classified program called Project Mogul. a series of high-altitude balloons designed to monitor Soviet nuclear testing activity by detecting sound waves in the upper atmosphere. This explanation, while plausible and supported by documentation, satisfied some people and left others entirely unconvinced. Roswell had by then become something larger than any single explanation could contain. It had become a symbol of government secrecy, of public curiosity, and of the vast distance between what people believe they have seen and what authorities are willing to confirm. The United States government had, by this point, recognized that the volume of UFO reports demanded some kind of organized response. The Air Force, which had primary responsibility for the nation's airspace, launched a series of formal investigations. The first was Project Sign, established in 1947. Its mandate was to collect and evaluate UFO reports systematically. What is interesting about Project Sign is that, internally, some of its investigators genuinely considered the possibility that the objects being reported might be of extraterrestrial origin. An early estimate reportedly entertained this possibility seriously before being rejected by senior officials who found it too speculative. Project Sign was succeeded by Project Grudge in 1949, which took a notably more dismissive approach. The operating assumption shifted. Many reports were explained away, sometimes with explanations that seemed to have been chosen for their convenience rather than their accuracy. Public and within certain parts of the military, trust in the process began to erode. The most substantial of these official investigations was Project Blue Book, which ran from 1952 until 1969. Over the course of those 17 years, Project Blue Book collected and reviewed more than 10,000 UFO reports from across the country. Its staff interviewed witnesses, consulted scientists, and developed a classification system for what they found. The vast majority of cases were eventually explained as conventional aircraft, astronomical objects, weather phenomena, or simple misidentifications. But a persistent residue of cases, somewhere between 5 and 10%, depending on how you count, resisted explanation entirely. Project Blue Book's official conclusions, when it closed in 1969, were twofold. UFOs posed no threat to national security, and nothing in the evidence supported an extraterrestrial explanation. These conclusions were reinforced by a parallel study conducted by the University of Colorado, led by physicist Edward Condon, which reached broadly similar findings and recommended that further official investigation was unlikely to be scientifically productive. Project Blue Book was closed. Official interest, at least publicly, faded, but the sightings did not stop. Over the following decades, reports continued to accumulate, some dismissed easily, others far less so. A handful of cases became particularly prominent, studied carefully by independent researchers, and discussed widely. In December of 1980, in Rendlesham Forest in Suffolk, England, something unusual was observed by personnel stationed at two nearby United States Air Force bases. Over the course of several nights, multiple witnesses reported seeing lights among the trees. Lights that descended, moved, and appeared to respond to the presence of observers. Physical traces were found on the ground, including indentations in the soil. Radiation readings taken at the site were reportedly elevated compared to background levels. The incident has been extensively investigated and extensively debated. It is often referred to as Britain's Roswell, and the comparison is instructive. Like Roswell, it is a case where official explanations have never fully satisfied those who were present. In March of 1997, the skies over Phoenix, Arizona, hosted one of the most widely witnessed aerial events in modern American history. Thousands of people across a large area of the state reported seeing a massive formation of lights, described variously as a V-shape or a series of orbs arranged in a deliberate pattern, moving slowly and silently overhead. The event lasted long enough for many observers to photograph and film it. The military later attributed some of the lights to flares dropped during a training exercise. Critics noted that the timing of the flare drop did not match the timing of the earlier sightings reported by many witnesses. The Phoenix Lights, as the event became known, remain a subject of active discussion. Then, in November of 2004, something happened in the skies over the Pacific Ocean that would eventually change the entire conversation around unidentified aerial phenomena. Pilots from the USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group, operating off the coast of California, encountered an object that behaved in ways none of them could account for. It was described as white, oblong, and roughly the size of a large commercial aircraft. Someone said it looked like a Tic-Tac. It had no visible wings, no exhaust, no discernible means of propulsion, and it moved in ways that defied conventional aerodynamics, accelerating instantaneously, stopping mid-flight, descending from enormous altitude in seconds. The encounter was tracked on multiple radar systems, recorded on infrared cameras, and observed directly by trained military pilots. The footage eventually became public years later, and its release prompted significant discussion about the limitations of existing explanations. The Nimitz case helped introduce a new piece of terminology that has since largely replaced the older UFO in official contexts. The term is UAP, Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena. The shift in language was deliberate. UAP is broader, more neutral, and carries fewer of the cultural associations that had accumulated around the word UFO over decades. It also extends the scope slightly beyond aerial objects, allowing for the possibility of phenomena observed in other environments as well. By the mid-2010s, the conversation had shifted considerably. Videos of military encounters with unexplained objects were leaked and then officially confirmed by the Department of Defense. Members of Congress began asking direct questions and demanding formal briefings. The government, after decades of official disinterest, began to re-engage. In 2021, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence released a preliminary assessment of UAP incidents reported by military personnel. The report reviewed 144 incidents and reached some careful conclusions. Most of the cases could not be explained with the data available. The report identified several categories of possible explanation: airborne clutter such as birds or balloons, atmospheric effects, classified technology operated by the United States or other countries, foreign surveillance systems, or a catch-all category described simply as other. Extraterrestrial technology was not listed as a probable explanation, but neither was it entirely ruled out. The report was notable for its tone, measured, genuinely uncertain, and free from the dismissiveness that had characterized earlier official responses. In 2022, the Pentagon established a dedicated office to handle the ongoing flow of reports. The All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, known as AARO, was given a broader mandate than any previous body, not just to collect reports, but to investigate and resolve them where possible, and to coordinate across military branches and intelligence agencies. By 2024, AARO had reported that of the cases it had been able to investigate in depth, the majority had explanations. Drones, balloons, satellites, atmospheric phenomena, even planets and stars misidentified under unusual lighting conditions. No confirmed evidence of extraterrestrial technology had been found. No confirmed evidence of reverse-engineered alien spacecraft. And yet a residue of genuinely unexplained cases remained, as it always has. It is worth spending a moment with the scientific perspective because it is often misrepresented in discussions of UFOs and UAPs. Mainstream scientists are not dismissive of the idea that there is something to investigate. What they are insistent upon is the standard of evidence required before conclusions can be drawn. The principle at work here is sometimes summarized as extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. The concern scientists raise is not that the sky is empty of mysteries, but that the evidence typically offered in UFO cases is not sufficient to support the conclusions sometimes drawn from it. Eyewitness testimony, while valuable, is subject to well-documented limitations. Memory is reconstructive, context shapes perception, and the human visual system can be reliably fooled by optical effects and atmospheric phenomena. Physical evidence, when it exists, has repeatedly turned out to have conventional explanations upon closer examination. None of this means that the remaining unexplained cases are trivial. It means that explaining them will require better data. Scientists in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence have consistently noted that if something genuinely anomalous is occurring in Earth's airspace, it deserves rigorous investigation. The question is not whether to investigate, but how to do so in a way that produces reliable knowledge. Beyond the question of what UAPs might physically be, ufology has become something larger than any single investigation. It is now a cultural phenomenon of considerable scope, conventions attended by thousands, online communities numbering in the millions, independent investigators who have dedicated years to specific cases, and an industry of books, documentaries, and podcasts exploring every angle of the subject. Within this broad community, interpretations vary widely. Some believe the unidentified objects represent visitors from other planets. Others argue they are classified human technology deliberately disguised as something inexplicable. Some propose more unusual frameworks, interdimensional visitors, or something else entirely beyond existing categories of thought. What surveys consistently show is that a significant portion of the public believes that some UFO sightings represent genuine encounters with non-human intelligence, even as official investigations have not produced evidence to support that conclusion. The gap between public belief and official findings reveals how much secrecy, cultural storytelling, and genuine unresolved mystery has shaped the way people relate to the skies above them. And perhaps that is where this story settles, at least for now, not in a firm answer, but in an honest acknowledgement of where we actually stand. The sky above us is vast, and our understanding of it is genuinely incomplete. We have instruments of extraordinary sensitivity, aircraft of remarkable capability, and scientific frameworks that have carried us from the surface of this planet all the way to the edges of the solar system. And still, occasionally, something appears that does not fit. Most UFOs, over time, become identified. A balloon caught in unusual light, a satellite on an unfamiliar trajectory, a natural atmospheric effect producing shapes and colors that our pattern-seeking minds interpret as something structured and deliberate. That process of identification is ongoing, and it is largely successful. But a small fraction resists. Cases accumulate where the data is clear and the explanations are not. And in those cases, the honest answer is simply that we do not yet know. The mystery of ufology has persisted not because people are credulous, nor solely because governments have withheld information. It has persisted because the universe is genuinely strange, because human perception is genuinely limited, and because the urge to understand what we have seen is one of the most enduringly human impulses there is. We look up because we are curious. We keep looking because some questions do not resolve quickly. And in that patient, uncertain looking, there's something worth honoring, a willingness to sit with mystery rather than force it into a shape it may not fit. Whatever is out there, the search continues.